She fined me for swimming in my own pool, so I said screw it and gave the ducks full access. HOA fined me for using my pool, so I turned it into a duck pond. Part 1. The duck feed and the red and blue flash. The sky was glowing red and blue, not from a sunset, but from flashing police lights bouncing off every suburban window. And there I stood, poolside, wearing nothing but flip-flops and determination, cradling a plastic tub labeled premium duck feed. Behind me, a full-blown duck party. They splashed, quacked, and flapped around like royalty, drifting between inflatable flamingos and giant watermelon floaties like they owned the place, which, to be fair, they kind of did now. Across the patio stood her, Karen, massive sunglasses, clipboard in hand, pointing at me like I'd just committed a felony in broad daylight. "That man is operating a biohazard," she shrieked. One of the cops, trying way too hard not to laugh, turned toward me. "Sir, is it true you turned your pool into a duck pond?" That was the moment. Everything boiled over. But to explain how I got to the point of tossing duck feed in front of law enforcement, we need to rewind to 1 week earlier, when the HOA declared war over water. Part 2. The pool, the sun hat, and the $500 fine I had only lived in the neighborhood for, 2 months? Just 60 days into what was supposed to be my dream come true. After 10 years of saving, budgeting, sacrificing weekend plans, and skipping vacations, I finally bought myself a real sanctuary, a backyard, a detached garage, and the crown jewel. A crystal-clear, custom-built pool with hand-laid tile and a deep end so perfect it looked like it belonged in a luxury resort. On that first sunny Saturday, I was floating in total bliss. My niece Maddie was giggling in her unicorn floaty, sun beaming, water shimmering out. It felt like I had made it. And then, click. The unmistakable sound of the side gate unlatching. I sat up, confused, only to see a woman I had never met, marching straight toward the pool like she was walking into a crime scene. Wide-brimmed sun hat, phone in one hand, a rolled-up HOA handbook in the other. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just barked. "Excuse me? Are you aware that you're in violation of community pool activity standards?" I laughed, out loud. I actually thought it was a joke. I told her, "This is my backyard, my pool." But her face didn't budge, not even a twitch. "This is HOA property, sir," she snapped. "The pool may be on your lot, but your activity is subject to oversight, and you didn't file a request." She spun on her wedge heel and stomped out, muttering something about a report and a violation code. I figured she was just some confused neighbor with too much time, until the next morning, when I found it. A white envelope, duct taped to my mailbox. Notice of violation, unauthorized pool activity. Fine, $500. I just stood there, mouth open, heart pounding. I called the number listed, straight to voicemail, left a message. No one ever called back. Still thinking this was some absurd misunderstanding, I brought it up at the next HOA meeting. But that was the moment I realized. Karen wasn't confused. She was in charge. Part 3. The clubhouse, the clipboard, and the closed vote. The HOA meeting was held in a clubhouse that looked like a rejected dentist's office. Bad lighting, stiff chairs, and coffee that tasted like it lost a bet. I walked in, expecting to clear things up with some reasonable adults. That was my first mistake, because seated at the center table was her, Karen DeLansancy, now officially introduced as acting HOA president. She smiled at me. but it was that fake, closed lip kind of smile that says, "You've already lost." I explained what happened, how I had just been floating in my pool with my niece. How I hadn't known I needed community notification to enjoy my own backyard. I barely got 2 sentences out before she cut me off. "It's a simple rule," she said. "No recreational pool use without advance community notice." "Notice to who?" I asked. Without breaking eye contact, she pulled out a binder. Inside, an updated HOA handbook dated 3 weeks prior. The policy? Recently revised. "Approved by majority vote," she added, before I could even ask where that vote had taken place. "A closed vote," she said calmly. "It was urgent. Urgent to stop a man from swimming in his own pool." I asked about an appeal. She gave me a polite shrug. "You can write a letter, but just no. If you swim again without prior approval, there will be another fine." Later that weekend, Maddie asked if she could come swim again. I had to look into her little excited face and tell her no. And that was the moment the bitterness really started to bloom. I had spent a decade building toward this pool, this peace, and now it was being stolen, not with a wrecking ball, but with a clipboard. Part 4. The fence, the photos, and the phantom rules. The next week, I started noticing things. Karen wasn't just walking by my house anymore, she was patrolling it, phone in hand, peeking through the fence, snapping photos like she was documenting a wildlife crime scene. One day, I was pruning my shrubs, yes, shrubs, and I hear her voice snake through the hedge. "Nice chairs," she said. "Hope you got approval for outdoor furniture placement." I blinked, laughed, went inside. But 2 days later, another envelope. Unauthorized poolside installations. Fine. $250. At that point, I was unraveling. I couldn't mow my lawn, sip coffee, or breathe near the pool without worrying whether I was violating some secret clause from the Karen Constitution of Control. I started reaching out to neighbors, hoping someone else had dealt with her wrath. Most were sympathetic, but skittish. One older guy sighed and said, "She's been like this for years. Best to just lay low." But I wasn't wired like that. I don't lay low when I'm being harassed for existing. Then came the third fine. And this one? This one nearly made me snap. Apparently, I'd caused a disturbance by inviting unauthorized guests. My crime, waving to the mailman, from my deck. That guest hadn't even stepped foot on the property. Fine. $500. Total so far? $1,250. So I sat down, wrote a formal appeal, citing lack of notice, procedural unfairness, and weaponized enforcement. What I got back? A PDF titled HOA Enforcement Protocol. 12 pages of legal gibberish. That basically boiled down to, we make the rules, you obey, and the next morning, as I stood at the window, sipping my coffee, Karen walked by again, smirked. "You could always donate it," she said. "The community could use a shared waiting area." I laughed out loud, but inside, something snapped. Part 5. The loophole, the ducks, and the plan. I wasn't about to let my life become a HOA dictatorship, especially not one run by a woman with a clipboard and a superiority complex. So I started thinking, if they won't let me use my pool, what if I just don't use it as a pool? I remembered something my uncle once said, back when his HOA tried fining him for his birdhouses. They can't fine you for nature. That line echoed in my brain for the rest of the evening. So I got to work. I started researching backyard wildlife sanctuaries, zoning laws, conservation loopholes, and the deeper I dug, the bigger my grin got. Buried in the county ordinance was a beautiful little clause. Properties may maintain aquatic habitats for native wildlife, provided they meet sanitation standards and pose no public hazard. In other words, no swimming? Fine. But what if my pool wasn't a pool anymore? What if it was a duck pond? That night, I cleared out all my harsh pool chemicals, switched to duck-safe water treatments, ordered aquatic plants, installed a small wooden ramp on the shallow end, even added a weatherproof sign that read, "Wildlife Observation Area. Please do not disturb." Then I made a friendly call to the local bird sanctuary. Just asking, totally casually, what it might take to care for a few rescue ducks. By the end of the week, I had 6 waddling ambassadors of chaos quacking in my backyard, happier than kids at summer camp. I named them after Supreme Court justices, because why not? The morning Karen first laid eyes on them, she froze. I watched her from the kitchen window, her jaw slack, her hand trembling, phone in the air like it was radioactive. "You're harboring animals in a recreational pool," she shrieked. I stepped outside, calm as a monk. "It's not a pool," I said, grinning. "It's a waterfowl refuge." She stormed off, screaming something about animal control. And then, the cops showed up. That's when the video started recording, and the internet would soon meet. The duck pond guy. Part 6. The flashlight, the floaty, and the midnight surveillance. Karen didn't sleep that night. I know, because I watched her. At exactly 2:13 a.m., her shadow paced the sidewalk across from my house. Flashlight in one hand, binoculars in the other, like she was hunting for ghosts, or maybe looking for duck crimes. Meanwhile, the ducks, totally unfazed. 2 were cuddled on a lawn chair. 1 was snoozing on a float shaped like a giant donut. Me? I was curled up on my couch, sipping cocoa, watching it all unfold through the window with the kind of grin you only get when you know chaos is working in your favor. But Karen's next move hit hard. By 9 a.m., a new letter arrived, not taped this time, hand-delivered, stamped urgent in bright red. The title, Violation of Structural Use Ordinance, Water Feature Overload. Translation, my duck pond was now being classified as a modified recreational structure, in violation of HOA Water Feature Policy. The fine, $1,500, and a written order to return it to its original residential purpose. 10 days. To either evict the ducks or face legal action. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so infuriating. Apparently, while bird sanctuaries were allowed, my pool was too much like a pool to count as not a pool. I called the county zoning office, praying for a miracle. The woman on the line sounded amused, but careful. Technically, she said, they're within their rights to issue a citation, but only if the ducks are deemed part of a man-made attraction. I blinked. So, what if they're not? She chuckled. Well, that's a process, but not impossible. The game had changed. Karen wasn't just trying to find me anymore. She was trying to bury me in paperwork and drown me in red tape. But she didn't realize. I was just getting warmed up. Part 7. The camera, the rumors, and the rise of the duck villain. If I thought things had already hit peak insanity, Karen proved me wrong, again. She didn't just escalate, she surveilled, literally. 2 days after the water feature violation, a brand new security camera appeared on her second-floor balcony, perched like a robotic hawk, staring directly into my backyard. No shame. No attempt to hide it. Just mounted up there, blinking red like a threat. I filed a complaint. HOA brushed it off. Property protection, they said. Apparently, spying on ducks now counted as environmental monitoring. But that wasn't the worst of it. Soon, the whispers started. The neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. The mom across the street wouldn't let her kid come over to see the ducks anymore. One guy muttered, "We heard you're turning your yard into a farm." Karen had started a rumor campaign. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, printed in bold, "Unsanctioned wildlife breeding grounds. Property value at risk." She made it sound like I was stockpiling goats, chickens, maybe even pigs, turning the neighborhood into Old MacDonald's outpost. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being cast out, labeled as that guy, the HOA rebel, the backyard nuisance. And the most ironic part? I hadn't broken a single actual law. But truth doesn't matter when someone like Karen is holding the clipboard. What she wielded wasn't legal authority. It was influence, manipulation, weaponized paper and paranoia. And it worked, until it didn't. Because that week, the HOA made one fatal mistake. They messed with Maddie. Part 8. The sketchbook, the clipboard, and the last straw. It was supposed to be a good day. Maddie was visiting again, tiny duck sketchbook in hand, waddling through my gate like a yellow ray of sunshine. All she wanted? To see Judge Quaxon, her favorite. 10 minutes later, Karen struck. She called the HOA's emergency line, claiming there was an unauthorized minor trespassing on an unstable aquatic site. What? A man actually showed up. Windbreaker, clipboard, zero soul. I met him at the gate, told him, politely but firmly, to get off my property. He didn't argue, but he did file a report. That night, I got an email. Minors are no longer permitted near aquatic wildlife features pending safety inspection. Translation: they banned Maddie, banned my 8-year-old niece, from sitting quietly beside 6 ducks in a 3-foot pool. I told her, tried to soften it, but she looked up at me, tears welling, and whispered, "Why can't she just leave us alone?" I didn't have an answer. That moment, that quiet, broken question from the kindest kid I know, was the exact second my helplessness turned into something else entirely. Anger. Not the shout and stomp kind. No. This was quieter, sharper. It wasn't about pool fines anymore, or bylaws, or duck ramps. It was about something deeper, about control, and how one woman, one bitter, power-drunk clipboard queen, could weaponize an entire system, to turn kindness into a violation, and make a little girl cry over ducks. That was it. The war had started, and this time, I wasn't going to play defense. Part 9. The spiral, the strategy, and the silent camera that night. I sat alone on my porch. No lights, just me. A cup of silence, and the soft rustling of ducks settling in for the evening. Their heads were tucked under their wings. Safe. Oblivious. But me? I was anything but. Karen had everything. The HOA board, the rumors, the bylaws, the law slowly tiptoeing in her favor. And I was just some guy, with a backyard, and 6 birds. But even in that spiral of frustration, my brain wouldn't shut off. It kept replaying the zoning officer's voice. Only if the ducks are part of an attraction. What if they weren't? What if this wasn't a pond, or a protest, but a statement? I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and hit record. No fancy editing, no dramatics, just my voice, telling the story, start to finish. I posted it with a simple title, HOA fined me for using my own pool, so I invited ducks instead. I figured a few friends might see it, maybe chuckle. By morning, 30,000 views. By evening, over 200,000. The comments poured in. Outrage, laughter, support. People from across the country shared their HOA horror stories. The hashtag #DuckPondGuy began to trend. Suddenly, Karen's clipboard wasn't the only thing people were talking about. But then, just when I felt like I finally had the upper hand, she hit back, hard. A certified letter, stamped with the county seal. Notice of immediate sanitation violation, filed by none other than Karen Delancey. According to the letter, my duck pond was now being reviewed as a vector-borne illness site pending a full inspection. I had 3 days to prove my pond wasn't a public health threat. She didn't want to fine me anymore. She wanted to bury me. In paperwork, in legal jargon, in fear. But what she didn't know? I had just started digging too. Part 10. The inspectors, the duck names, and the battle of optics 3 days. That's what the county gave me. To prove my duck pond wasn't a biological hazard. So I scrambled. I cleaned, skimmed, tested the water twice. I called the bird sanctuary, told them everything. They sent over a vague but very official letter. The ducks are part of an ongoing observation program. It wasn't airtight, but it was enough to buy me time, and just in time. The inspectors showed up, 2 guys in khaki shirts, mirrored sunglasses, and clipboards. They looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Still, I greeted them with the biggest, calmest smile I could fake. "Welcome to the Waterfowl Refuge," I said. "Shall we begin the tour?" I showed them the duck-safe water treatments, the eco-friendly floaties, the wooden ramp, the perimeter fencing. They nodded, took notes, measured things, said almost nothing. Just cold silence and a ticking pen. By the time they left, I still had no clue if I was cleared or condemned. And then, just to twist the knife, Karen walked by, smug, thermos in hand, probably filled with pure vinegar. "The city was out today," she chirped. "Hope they didn't mind the smell." I didn't respond, didn't blink. I just watched her walk away and let the silence scream louder than anything I could say. But she wasn't done. The next morning, I got word an emergency HOA board meeting had been called. Of course, I wasn't invited. But a neighbor slipped me a copy of the agenda. Item 1. Motion to seek legal action for repeated violations and defamation of HOA leadership. Defamation? Apparently, my video, which never said her name, never showed her face, was now considered a personal attack on community integrity. And so came the next letter. Cease and desist. Immediately remove all social media uploads referencing HOA activity or else face civil penalties. That was it. No more cute floaties, no more hoping for logic or fairness. Karen had tried fines. She'd tried fear. Now she was trying to shut me up. But what she forgot, she was no longer just fighting me. She was fighting a movement. And I wasn't going anywhere. Part 11. The cupcakes, the permit, and the party they couldn't stop. I needed a win, a real one. Not views, not sympathy, but joy. So I decided to host something small, peaceful, a little backyard event, not for revenge, but for the ducks and for Maddie. She helped plan it, of course, drew up little fact cards for each duck. Clarence, the quiet one. Ruth, the assertive one. We baked duck-shaped cupcakes, cut yellow construction paper into party hats. I even laminated a welcome sign that said, Waterfowl Sanctuary Celebration, BYOB, bring your own breadcrumbs. No music, no bounce houses, just 7 guests, 2 folding tables, and Maddie in her duck hoodie. 10 minutes in. Everyone was smiling, laughing softly. The ducks waddled by like they'd RSVP'd. And then, the silence shattered. Karen. She called the city again, this time reporting, an unlicensed public gathering featuring unsanctioned livestock, like I was running a back alley petting zoo. An officer showed up, embarrassed, apologetic even, but still, he had to shut it down. Without a permit, he said, we can't allow this to continue. I showed him the guest list. 7 adults, 1 child, no speakers, no signs, just ducks. He sighed, but rules were rules. Maddie cried, again, but this time, it wasn't quiet. She sobbed into my sleeve and whispered, "Why does the world feel mean, Uncle?" And I didn't know how to answer. So we packed everything up, the cupcakes, the sketchbook, the joy. That night, I sat by the pool, alone again. Just me, the sagging, inflatable flamingo, and a new kind of fury, because this wasn't just about ducks anymore. It was about the kind of power that crushes joy just because it can. And Karen, she'd made one big mistake. She thought she'd broken me, but all she did was ignite me. Part 12, the paper trail, the camera tag, and the beginning of the end. That night, I was done. Done being pushed. Done being silenced. Done watching a little girl cry over ducks. I nearly gave up, nearly drained the pool, rehomed the ducks, called a realtor. But then, something shimmered in the grass, right near the fence line. I walked over, kneeled down, and picked it up. A tag from Karen's surveillance camera. Tiny, metallic, but unmistakable. Stamped with a serial number and a logo I recognized. I went inside, pulled out my laptop, typed that serial into the manufacturer's website. Boom, model, activation date, owner's name, Karen Delancey. Not surprising. But the kicker? That model was part of a commercial-grade surveillance suite, designed for public spaces, registered under a business license, her business, Karen's Community Realty. That moment, everything clicked. If she was using her HOA authority to drive homeowners out and shape property values, this wasn't about pool rules. This was about money. And that gave me leverage. Because using a business surveillance device to monitor private property without consent, that's not just creepy, that's illegal. So I called in a favor. My cousin knew a local real estate attorney, someone who hated HOA drama as much as I did. I sent him everything: photos, documents, screenshots, even a Facebook post Karen had made advertising a house she was selling. The same week she fined me for community disturbance. He looked at the files and smiled. "This isn't just a conflict of interest," he said. "This might be a violation of privacy statutes." That was all I needed. No more YouTube rants, no more emotional appeals. From now on, it was strategy. It was documentation. It was war. On paper. Part 13. The partnership, the press, and the perfect setup. Now that I had leverage, I stopped reacting and started planning. First, I reached out to the bird sanctuary again. But this time, I wasn't asking for advice. I was proposing a formal partnership. Turns out, my little duck pond had gone viral. They'd received a flood of calls, donations, volunteers, even merch orders. They were thrilled. And within a few days, they signed the paperwork to designate my backyard as a temporary observation site while their new refuge was under construction. Stamped, county compliant, official, 1 domino down. Next, I contacted a local eco-journalist. Weeks ago, she'd messaged me about doing a story on suburban wildlife. This time I gave her the full scoop. Told her about the ducks, the fines, the surveillance, the silence that had spread like mold across our community. We agreed to publish the article the same day my final move went live, but the final nail came straight from Karen's mouth. At the next HOA meeting, yes, I attended, this time with a lapel mic tucked under my collar. I played it cool. Waited. Then asked, "Are there any plans to restrict outdoor wildlife observation on private lots?" Karen, never one to miss a spotlight, smirked and said, "As far as I'm concerned, any property that attracts pests, ducks, birds, squirrels, should be treated like a public nuisance." That was my cue. "Oh?" I asked, calm as a pond. "Would your backyard qualify then? The one with the bird feeders, the squirrel stations, and the 2 koi ponds?" The room went silent. Karen froze. I tapped my lapel mic. "Don't worry. I'm not filming you. You've been filming me. Just making sure the hypocrisy travels both ways." The murmurs started immediately. A few neighbors turned in their seats. Even board members looked uncomfortable. I went home that night and finished the final piece of the plan. At 7 a.m. sharp the next morning, I installed a massive sign on my fence, facing Karen's yard. "Protected Wildlife Observation Zone. Surveillance without permit is a criminal offense." Below that, a laminated copy of the relevant county statute, just for her convenience. And then, I sent a full document package to the entire HOA board. Every fine. Every threatening letter. The Wildlife Partnership Certificate. Photos of her surveillance camera. Her real estate flyer tied to the same property she tried to regulate. Oh, and a legal memo from my attorney. Subject line: unlawful surveillance and abuse of HOA authority. CC'd to the zoning office, the bird sanctuary, and the eco-journalist. By 7:12 a.m., Karen saw the sign. By 7:14, she was pounding on my front door. I didn't answer. I just watched from the kitchen window as she screamed into her phone, waving her clipboard like a drowning flag, while 6 ducks calmly waddled past her car like a parade of poetic justice. Part 14, the group chat, the resignation, and the duck-only celebration. By noon that same day, the HOA group chat, oh yes, I had a spy in there, was on fire. One board member asked, "Did Karen actually have the authority to issue fines without a vote?" Another questioned, "Why were HOA funds used to rent private surveillance gear?" And by 2 p.m., an emergency board meeting was called. I didn't attend. Didn't need to. At 5 p.m., a notice was slipped into every resident's mailbox. As of this date, Karen Delancey has officially stepped down as HOA president. An independent audit of recent enforcement actions will follow. No confetti, no fireworks, just a paper crown slowly crumpling. That night, I hosted a quiet little celebration. Nothing wild. Just me, Maddie, 2 neighbors I trusted, and the ducks. We called it the duck-only party. Maddie made tiny signs. Reserved for Quaxon. Donut float VIP. Clarence only. No clipboards allowed. We laughed. We had cookies shaped like duck feet. We didn't play music, just let the wind and quacking fill the silence. Across the fence? Karen's house was quiet. Lights off, blinds drawn. She was still there. But for once, she wasn't watching. And she definitely wasn't in control. Because in the end, the revenge wasn't in the ducks, or the fines I dodged, or the viral fame. It was in beating her, at her own paper game. And I wasn't done yet. Part 15, the cookies, the community, and the final act. 2 weeks after Karen's resignation, the neighborhood felt like it had been thawed out of an icy dictatorship. People started waving again. Kids rode bikes past my house without suspicious parents peeking from curtains. The mom across the street even smiled at Maddie. for the first time in months. Then, something beautiful happened. An elderly couple walked up to my door one afternoon, holding a tin of cookies shaped like little ducks, with a note taped to the lid that simply read, "Thank you for standing up to the madness." It wasn't just a win, it was a reckoning. But the best part? Karen still lived next door. Every morning, she got to watch Maddie giggling, tossing breadcrumbs into the pond. She got to hear the joyful chaos she tried so hard to crush. Every honk, every splash, every quack was a tiny reminder that control had slipped through her fingers. And the pond? It didn't just survive. It grew. More plants, more shade, more smiles. It became a place where neighbors stopped to chat, where kids came to draw, where even grown men brought breadcrumbs like offerings to suburban royalty. But still, one thing kept echoing in my mind. It's not done. Not yet. Because there was still one final act left, one last flick of poetic justice that would burn Karen's ego to ash. Right in front of the community she once ruled with a clipboard and a glare. And the idea? It didn't come from me. It came from Maddie. Part 16. The birthday, the banner, and the duck day she couldn't ignore. It was a lazy afternoon. Maddie sat under the old maple tree in my yard, sketching Judge Quaxon in all his waddling glory. Then, out of nowhere, she looked up and said, "Uncle, can we throw a birthday party for the ducks?" I laughed at first, but something about it clicked. Not just a party, a celebration, one that no one, not even Karen, could shut down. The next morning, I filed the paperwork. Official title? Neighborhood Conservation Awareness Day, held entirely on private property, backed by the bird sanctuary, covered under county wildlife education guidelines. Everything was legal. Everything was permitted. I reached out to a local animal rescue group, 2 eco-friendly vendors, a children's author who'd written a book about pond wildlife. They all said yes. No bounce houses, no loudspeakers, just knowledge, nature, and ducks, and one little twist. The night before the event, I installed a retractable projector screen on the side of my garage, chairs in neat rows, like a theater, and a banner across the top that read, "Ducks Over Drama, Celebrating Nature in HOA Communities." By 10 a.m., people began arriving, not just neighbors, but bloggers, local press, even a few city officials. And Karen? She watched from behind her blinds, pale, frozen, and when she saw the county inspector, the same one from her failed complaint, walking up my driveway with a smile, she slammed her blinds shut. The event began with a warm welcome from the sanctuary rep. Then Maddie stood up and read her poem, Ode to Judge Quaxon. The adults chuckled. The kids handed out little cups of seed. Ducks waddled, heads bobbing like they understood every word. Neighbors smiled. They talked. They reconnected. And for the first time in ages, the neighborhood felt like a community. But we weren't done. Because just before we wrapped up, I stepped forward and said, "Before we end, I'd like to show you a little video of how this all started." Part 17, the footage, the fence, and the fall of Karen. The projector flickered on, and the backyard fell silent. On screen, surveillance footage, Karen's own camera angle, legally obtained, by the way, thanks to my attorney, and the internal HOA investigation her drama triggered. The crowd leaned in. First clip, Karen, leaning over my fence at 2 a.m., whispering into her phone while filming ducks sleeping on floaties. Next, her pacing like a prison guard, yelling into my yard, recording Maddie through the slats. Then, footage from HOA meetings. If they won't cooperate, make them pay. Less noise means higher value. We don't need to announce votes if it's for the greater good. Audible gasps. And finally, one last clip. Karen, standing at the edge of the pond, screaming, "You disgusting feathered nuisance!" I hit pause. Silence. Total silence. Then I stepped forward. I didn't show this to shame anyone, but to show what happens when power goes unchecked. This pond, these ducks, they reminded me of something. Community doesn't come from rules. It comes from respect. Applause erupted. Actual full-on applause. Even a few HOA board members looked visibly shaken. One leaned in after and whispered, "We'll be rewriting the bylaws, and Karen's camera, it's coming down." Within 48 hours, the surveillance camera was gone. The silence that followed was beautiful. But the icing? It came a week later. Part 18, the grant, the garden, and the listing no one touched one week after the video premiere. My inbox dinged with something I never expected. An email from a local environmental group. Subject line, "Urban Habitat Grant Opportunity. You've been nominated." Turns out, the story had traveled farther than I knew. They wanted to fund an expansion, a micro-wetland, a pollinator garden, an educational kiosk for school visits. In short, they were offering to turn my backyard into a protected urban wildlife habitat. I signed faster than a duck chasing breadcrumbs. And just like that, the duck pond became something bigger, a living monument to suburban resistance, to laughter, to nature, to poetic justice. And Karen? Well, her house went up for sale. Of course it did. But the best part? One neighbor told me they saw her rip the sign down herself when a potential buyer asked about the adorable duck sanctuary next door. Apparently, not everyone hates quacking. And as for me, I didn't just get to keep my pool, I transformed it. From a battleground into a refuge. From weaponized rules into ripples of laughter. And every morning now, as the sun rises and the ducks glide silently across the calm water, I take a deep breath and smile. Because somewhere, just across the fence, Karen is probably sipping bitter tea from a mug that says, "I run this neighborhood." But not anymore. Now, the ducks do.